Welcome to The Shift Show with Adriana Bucci. Join me every week to learn all about narcissistic abuse recovery, healing from physical and emotional pain after the abuse, and everything else to do with toxic people and how they affect your physical, emotional, and mental health. And no, you are not the crazy one. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Let's get right to it. Welcome to this week's episode of The Shift Show. Today I'm going to be talking about the personality traits that are associated with TMS, aka tension myositis syndrome, aka the mind-body syndrome. And these personality traits are traits that can also manifest in people who went through childhood trauma, including narcissistic abuse. And I will also say that these personality traits can manifest for other reasons for childhood trauma. I'm just making the correlation between narcissistic abuse specifically as the trauma and TMS, which is short for tension myositis syndrome, which is the chronic pain thing that I talked about in my last episode. If you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about in regards to tension myositis syndrome and chronic pain and the personality traits and everything, I would highly suggest that you listen to last week's episode first so that this episode will make more sense. And these traits are all general traits that everybody kind of has to some extent, but when you have a lot of these traits, it is definitely an indication of childhood trauma. And these are not personality traits that are to be demonized or made bad in any way. So I will also mention that this is not a bad way to be necessarily, but when these traits interfere with your day-to-day life and you're also experiencing chronic pain, and you still don't believe that there's a connection with your pain and the mind-body connection, and you have these traits, this is just like extra proof kind of to get people to believe in it, because it is a very hard to believe thing. Like I mentioned in the last episode, I was absolutely offended by just the notion that my chronic physical pain, my TMJ dysfunction, the jaw pain and migraines that I was experiencing forever, like for 4 years, not forever, but those 4 years, had anything to do with some sort of childhood trauma. So I will absolutely empathize with anyone who does not believe in it, because it was so hard for me to wrap my head around it myself when I first came across this whole theory. And yeah, I just figure because there is so much to talk about with the mind-body connection, I might as well just get into more on the personality traits. And I will add a few examples with some of these traits on how I had these traits myself and how I believe that they manifested from certain situations and traumas that I had gone through in my childhood. And if you need any more information on tension myositis syndrome, the mind-body syndrome, anything John Sarno related, I would highly recommend checking out tmswiki.org. That's tmswiki.org. There is a plethora of information there. There's even forums of people who have had success stories with various different types of conditions. So if you don't know where to start with this whole mind-body thing, or you still don't believe it, or you simply just want more information, I would highly recommend visiting tmswiki.org. There's so many stories, there's so many people talking about how this worked for them. They were cured of their pain after years. Like there's people who have been in chronic pain for 15 years plus, like 30 years, like such a long time to endure that level of pain. And they found relief by doing this inner emotional work that I always talk about. So, and you can find these traits in more detail on the tmswiki.org website. I am just going with the list that they have because they pretty much have everything covered, and I am going to add in my own examples. So the first trait, which a lot of people have, is perfectionism. So are you a perfectionist? when you are working on anything, does it have to be absolutely perfect before you submit it to your boss if it's a work project, or post it on, like, if you're making a social media post, even if it's just if it's like you have a private account and you're still just posting something and it has to be perfect and every word in it has to be perfect, every hashtag has to be perfect. Do you have like a picture in your head on how everything absolutely has to be? Like, are you planning some sort of event and you have this idea of how it has to be, and if it does not go perfectly the way you think it has to be, it's pretty much the end of the world? And do you like skip eating sometimes in order to perfectly have a task done perfectly? You know, like, are there times where you're working on something, it's not perfect, and then you skip your own needs and your own, you know, basic human needs, like eating or going to the washroom even, things like that? Like, do you kind of like just wait until everything's perfect before you proceed with stuff? And do you put like 110% of yourself into absolutely everything and end up having burnout without realizing why you're even doing all this stuff? And then the other thing with being a perfectionist is you kind of get pissed off when you see other people who are not as perfect as you and are not putting the dedication and perfection into everything that they do as you are. And then they end up having like a less stressful time with completing a task, or they get more recognition at work than you. And it's just kind of like, well, how freaking dare they? And it's just so upsetting because you have this perfectionistic quality about yourself, and this other person, from what you see on the surface level, is not giving it the dedication and the perfection that you are. So why do they get all this recognition and you don't? So in a upbringing with a narcissistic parent or family, perfectionism is a rampant issue. I was such a perfectionist, and I still have little blips here and there where I am being a perfectionist. But the difference now that I have done all this healing work is that I can catch myself when I am being a perfectionist, and I can just say to myself, like, okay, this actually does not matter. This is not going to impact me negatively, and done is better than perfect pretty much all of the time. It's not like I'm doing open heart surgery. That's when being a perfectionist is important, or open brain surgery, or, you know, something that would be a life and death situation for somebody. So realistically, looking at it now, it's just like, wow, like I cared about so much crap that really didn't matter, and how perfect everything had to be. Like, my makeup had to be so perfect. My hair had to be completely in place. And if not, I couldn't do anything. Like, my earlier YouTube videos, I was still being such a perfectionist and just focusing so much on having to look absolutely perfect before I could even bother filming myself. And now here I am with a podcast. I'm literally recording it on my phone and just kind of going with whatever theme comes up for me each week, because it does not have to be perfect. And even if I do stumble on my words sometimes in the podcast, it's just like, hey, whatever. So back to my initial point of how this has anything to do with being raised by a narcissist. And again, if you had different trauma, there's probably different reasons why you might also be a perfectionist. So this is just that particular experience and my opinion of it. If your experience was different, then that is cool. That is you. Yeah, so I think I'm catching myself doing it right now as I record this podcast episode, that I am being a perfectionist by putting out all these little disclaimers about this might not apply to you if, but like, you know what? Every single word that I say, I've accepted this, that every word I say is not going to resonate with every single person. So take what works for you from this and leave what doesn't work for you from this. So yeah, being raised by a narcissist, you are kind of walking on eggshells all the time, because you don't know when your narcissistic parent is going to snap at you. You have no idea if you do something wrong or you do something right if that parent is going to yell at you or shame you for some reason or other. So that was a big thing for me. And I got a lot of this perfectionistic trauma as well in school. So I had a lot of teachers who were just kind of like mean and would shame me for writing letters the wrong way. So if I, like, for example, I got yelled at by a teacher for writing the number 7 with like a line in the middle because that's the European way and not the Canadian way. And I'm just thinking like, okay, well, I am European, so what's wrong with that? But like, I literally got yelled at by a teacher for doing that. And that, being yelled at by a teacher, is a small trauma. But when you combine that with being raised by a narcissist and having even more trauma like that, where you do something, you think you do a good job at it, and then your parent shames you for it, or you do it again perfectly the way that your parent wanted you to do it, and then all of a sudden that time you did it wrong, even though you didn't, it can be forming. It's like during your formative years when you're a kid, this causes you to be a perfectionist later in life. So that's why when I was working in the corporate environment, everything I did had to be perfect. Every email I sent to anybody had to be absolutely perfect. And I was such a perfectionist. So if this resonates with you and you are a perfectionist and you have chronic pain, you need to look into the mind-body connection if you still don't believe it. Another trait is goodism and people-pleasing. So I'll start with goodism because I think these are two different traits and like they're still both very valid. So goodism is the desire to be viewed as a good person. So you do stuff to make sure that other people know that you're a good person. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be viewed as a good person, of course. But when you're literally stressing out about it, and you can't just relax, then that's a problem. Like, you can't just do stuff to just do good things, and you have to like announce it to the world, like, oh, I did this awesome thing. I rescued a dog and I'm such a great person. Like, look at me, view me as a good person and not a terrible person. And in the situation where you are raised by a narcissist, you literally feel like you're a bad person all the time. So you want to have the complete opposite perception from other people to make sure that you look like a good person. So that is totally linked to being raised by a narcissist. People pleasing is another one. So if you are like, I think people pleasing is pretty self-explanatory, but basically, if you are just going out of your way to make other people happy, even if, you have this fear that that other person's going to be mad at you or, not want to talk to you anymore because you didn't make them happy for whatever reason, or you go out of your way to reschedule your day around one person who you just don't want to piss them off for whatever reason. And in doing this, you don't realize how counterintuitive it kind of is, because while you're trying to make this other person happy, you're pissing off other people at the same time. And you're like, you have to accept the fact that you cannot make everybody happy, but it's very hard to do this when you are such a people pleaser and you've been kind of raised to be a people pleaser. And when you are raised by a narcissist, you have to kind of cater to every whim of that parent. And that transfers to you in the rest of your life. You don't just turn 18 or you don't just move out of your parents' house and stop people pleasing, because this is just an ingrained behavior that you have from going through that kind of trauma. Legalist is another trait. This is a new one to me, but it makes a lot of sense that it is a kind of trait that would be part of TMS and mind-body syndrome. And it's basically somebody who thinks that their views are right and anybody else's views are completely incorrect. And you're a right fighter and you think that the world would be a better place if everyone just had your views. And you take forever to make a decision. You worry you're going to make the wrong choice all the time. Stuff like that. And this is definitely a trauma response, and you're actually uncomfortable being around other people who have different opinions than you do because it's threatening to you. So if this is a trait that you have, that could be a reaction to being raised by a narcissist because you've been gaslit so much and you just want to get to the bottom of the truth. And once you do a bunch of inner work, you realize that the truth can be so subjective for so many different people. But having this legalist type of personality trait, it manifests in the opposite way of being raised by a narcissist, because when you're gaslit and you're being told that things that happened didn't actually happen, you create this sort of personality trait for yourself that the way you view things is correct. But you're not willing to see other ways because you're terrified of being gaslit by somebody else. So that kind of goes with thinking that everyone's kind of out to get you, which is another trauma response from being raised by a narcissist. And you just think like people don't have your best interests at hand when it doesn't actually matter, and like not everyone wants to see you fail, but you feel like they do. So that is how that relates to narcissistic abuse in childhood. Another one is stoic personality, and I don't really think I need to explain it that much, but basically you're just completely emotionless. And well, what you show to the outside world is that you have no emotions, and you repress them to show that you're in control of your life and you have your shit together and everything's okay, and you don't cry for any reason, and you just don't show emotions because it's just not cool. And you can't express any emotions. You don't even realize that you have any emotions. And this was totally me, because before I started doing the work, I thought I didn't have any emotions, and I just thought this whole idea that I have to process repressed emotions made absolutely no sense, because I had no emotions and I was a very stoic person. I was just like no reaction to anything a lot of the time, you know? And there's a difference between like being sociopathic and stoic, so I will say that. There are narcissists who display stoicness, but that is completely different. When you are stoic as a response to your trauma, you really are internalizing everything inside and just repressing and repressing and repressing and trying to show a face, like you're putting a mask on to avoid showing any emotions because it's terrifying. And this is true if you have had your emotions invalidated as a child, which would absolutely happen when you're raised by a narcissist, because your emotions are pretty much an inconvenience to that person and therefore you can't show them. So that is how you develop the stoic personality trait. And then, of course, there's anxiety and fear as your personality traits, which pretty much self-explanatory. Low self-esteem. I had absolutely like no self-esteem growing up. And being bullied as a child didn't help that whatsoever. And just, you know, my narcissistic parents' response to that also did not help. For me, it was basically, when I was being bullied, I would just get, oh, you need to be stronger and you need to show them that they can't bully you. So stop crying and, you know, get over it, basically. Which, you know, that does not help the self-esteem of a child whatsoever. Hostility and aggression are other personality traits that would come out of having TMS and childhood trauma in general. And, you know, it just really depends. Like if you have like a really big reaction to a seemingly small thing, you can rest assured that that big reaction, it's not about that tiny thing that happened. There is more aggression in there that you've been repressing. And of course, this applies to being narcissistically abused, because when you find out that you have been narcissistically abused, you're pissed. You are pissed off. So you need to have an outlet for that anger and understand that the anger is not going to hurt you and it's okay to feel it, but that is for another episode. And another one is dependency or codependency. So, you know, when you make plans, do you prefer if other people take the lead? Do you put yourself in situations where like other people kind of take care of you? Do you avoid taking risks? Things like that. And are you terrified of being alone? So for me, it was kind of the opposite. I enjoyed being alone because for me, it was like, oh, okay, so nobody can insult me if there's nobody here. So I am protected from the like insults and wounding that other people can inflict on me if I just isolate myself from the outside world. So I was one of those people where I just really enjoyed alone time, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying alone time, but you have to understand why you are enjoying that alone time. Is it because you have a fear of getting yelled at or being put down or insulted, or you have to walk on eggshells around people all the time, so you just would rather be on your own? So dependency can also manifest from being raised by a narcissist as well. It just really depends on your particular experience. So this one did not it kind of applied to me because I waited for other people to take the lead on stuff, but I was kind of like one of those loner dependent types of people, if that makes any sense. So yeah, those are the main personality traits of having chronic pain, tension myositis syndrome, mind-body syndrome. And if you have these traits, they're not bad. They're not bad. They are a normal reaction to whatever trauma you went through, whether that is narcissistic abuse or a different type of trauma. Like you can't demonize the fact that you have these personality traits because that was your particular experience. And these traits don't just magically go away because you know that you have them. You have to do the inner emotional work in order to start unraveling these personality traits. And it's hard work. Like, it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. But if you are at a point in your life where you really want to be out of pain, whether that is chronic physical pain or emotional pain, and most of the time, if you have been doing a great job at repressing all those emotions, chances are it is chronic physical pain or a mystery condition or just random mystery symptoms, whether that's vertigo, random stomach pains, and, a lot of stuff that I discussed in the past episode. And again, you got to make sure that you have been checked out by your doctor and that you have nothing, particularly bad going on that is life-threatening, like a tumor or, a fracture, things like that, because that would be reasons that it makes sense for you to have pain. And that is something that you should definitely rule out before deciding that it is TMS. But if it's been like something like migraines for 10 years, your jaw is misaligned like mine was, or still is. My jaw is still misaligned. Like the treatment that I was doing, I was really just at the beginning stages of it. So there's no way that those beginning stages fixed my pain. It was doing the inner emotional work, and I quit doing that treatment like not even 1/4 of the way through it. Like, I was supposed to have braces for almost 2 years, and I only had them for a few months. 4 months tops, I think. So there's no way my jaw was fixed. Like, even when I look at my smile, like my mouth is, like my teeth are misaligned. So my upper jaw and my lower jaw do not align whatsoever. So that is a structural abnormality, and there is nothing wrong with that. That does not mean that I need to have pain. And that is the proof that the pain is mind-body related and not because of structural abnormalities. So I hope that this episode has been helpful for anyone who has been curious about the TMS personality traits. I will have another episode next week, probably related to TMS, but maybe not. You'll find out next week, because I will also find out next week, because I'm not going to be a perfectionist about this podcast. So yeah, let me know if there's anything that you would like me to tackle. Feel free to shoot me an email at letsgetyourshifttogether@gmail.com. And feel free to check my website, www.letsgetyourshifttogether.com, for more resources. I have an entire page dedicated to resources for TMS and chronic pain and doing the emotional work. I also have an ebook, which is only $7, and it walks you through step by step how to do the emotional work to get yourself out of this pain, whether that is emotional or physical pain. It is super helpful. It's also available on my website. I will put the direct link as well in the podcast notes, and you can see some people have reviewed my book already, and it is helping. So yeah, I hope this has been helpful, and we will see you next week. Bye.